I'm Jolene Wynn, and this is the Porn Addict's Wife podcast, a bonus episode, Conversations with Rob, How to Forgive Yourself. I used to think of myself as the wife of a porn addict, but I do not think of myself that way anymore, and you don't have to either. In this podcast, I am going to teach you how to manage your mind and your emotions so that you can stop living your life around your husband's pornography addiction. I am going to teach you how to stop being the victim and how to conquer his pornography addiction, even if he never does. I'm Jolene Wynn. I am a certified life coach, and I am a member of the LDS faith and the wife of a former porn addict. And this is a podcast for the Porn Addict's Wife. Hello, my ladies. I am very excited. I am very excited. I have a very special podcast guest today. I have Rob here joining me.
Hello.
And it has been a while.
It has?
Yeah, I feel like.
It has?
Yeah. You said that like a question. So it's been a while since Rob has joined us, but I really wanted him to join today because, as you ladies know, we have been talking a lot about forgiveness over the last couple of weeks of the podcast, because I am teaching my How to Forgive masterclass inside my coaching program next week, which you can still totally join. You just go to my website, jolenewynn.com. You can sign up for my program, and that will give you access to this class that starts next week. And it's going to be all about forgiveness. And I am going to be teaching a little bit about what we're going to talk about today with Rob in the master class. But I wanted him to come on and kind of talk to us and talk to me and have this conversation about what it looks like to forgive yourself. Because I have had personal experiences with forgiving myself as well as forgiving him. But I wanted him to talk about what his experience has been like of, like, how do you forgive yourself for a pornography addiction?
So in my past guest appearances on this podcast, I've often had the thought of your listener in mind.
Sure.
Right? So I'm trying to explain things from my perspective for your listener, right? For the spouse. And there can be a bit of that perspective, but I think this perspective is also I'm thinking more tonight about the man,
yeah,
the husband, the significant other that is struggling or had struggled in the past, but then how do you forgive yourself for those actions?
Yeah.
So this may not be as helpful, I maybe say, for your podcast listener, but maybe just hearing the perspective and the need to forgive yourself.
Well, I think it's actually really, really good. So ladies, don't tune out, okay? And don't just hand this to your husband and be like, you need to fix yourself, so here's this podcast episode for you. Because I think it's actually a really good point. I think this is really good for you guys to hear, because as far as the wife goes, it is very tempting to want the husband, we want to say intellectually, like, yeah, we think he should forgive himself. Of course, he deserves forgiveness, blah, blah, blah. But part of us, I've seen this so many times in my clients, part of us doesn't want him to because of what we make it mean. What if he does forgive himself? What if he feels like he has been forgiven? If I'm still dealing with it, then what does that mean? Does that mean if he forgives himself, does that mean that, like, I'm just supposed to forget about it? Is it fair? It brings up a lot of these questions, which is why
it's, can he not be
yes,
hurt?
100%. So this is why it's so crucial for you to learn how to forgive, because otherwise, even if he forgives himself and even if he goes through all of this, you're still left with a lot of pain, a lot of resentment, a lot of hurt. And that can come up even if he forgives himself.
And there's also the idea of that if he forgives himself, does that somehow mean
he'll do it again? Yes.
Or that if he's not hurting, if he's not feeling the pain of it, then maybe you don't want him to forgive himself, because then he could be more likely to do it again. Is the conclusion. Because which is false. It's the opposite.
Yes. Because our brain thinks that. We think that often, that if we did something wrong, then we need to continue to feel guilt or shame about it, because our brain thinks that that will somehow prevent us from repeating that action in the future. But that's not actually correct.
We think the acute pain, the acute guilt, the acute shame is what's preventing us from taking the action.
Correct.
And we especially for addiction, take the action anyways.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, you have acute pain, you have acute guilt, you have acute shame. You're still taking the action anyways. Mm-hmm. In fact, a lot of the driving factor is all that shame and guilt bottled up underneath that will actually force more pornography use. Because if the source of the pornography use is bottling up emotions and needing the distraction from the emotion, needing distraction from pain, unprocessed emotions, well then, as pornography is used, a lot of guilt, a lot of shame builds up, and if that's not being processed, well, that's just even more
just going to keep you in that
to
cycle.
Distract yourself from.
100%.
Right? For
those of you who are new or don't understand what we're talking about, go listen to, there's a podcast episode I did called His Pornography Addiction Is Not About You or Sex. So go listen to that one. There's also one called Buffering. Both of those talk about what we're talking about right now, where the source of pornography addiction is not a desire for sex. Even though pornography is sexual, it is not about sex. Pornography, the seeking of pornography. It is about a desire to escape or to distract yourself from an emotion that you're feeling. So as Rob's saying, if you are feeling guilt or shame, and that is not an emotion you know how to process and know how to feel, then often you will turn to something that feels better. Ladies, we often turn to online shopping or food, right? Or social media. But often men will turn to pornography. It's very appealing. It has this hormonal uplift at the end, and it's very appealing. And so that is the distraction of choice. So if you don't know what to do with guilt and shame, and then you keep yourself in that guilt and shame, it can often just perpetuate the same behavior.
And kind of off topic, but sex itself can be used as a buffer to distract yourself from certain emotions.
Sure.
I don't know if women do this as often as maybe more
I think they do. This is a whole different podcast episode, but I do think women will do that to make themselves feel better about themselves physically.
Okay.
Right? Like if you're feeling not as confident or not as sexy, then you want reassurance. This is the word that everybody, right? You want to be reassured. You want compliments. You want him to kiss you. You want him to feel, you want to do something that makes you feel desirable. Well, the only reason you want that is because you're not feeling desirable. And so then you do something like maybe you put on lingerie or you put out or you initiate sex, and you want that because you think that that will make you feel desirable. It's a distraction from you feeling however it is that you're feeling right now.
So when you're feeling miserable as a man, sometimes sex can be used as the buffer to not feel miserable.
Right.
Now, that feels good in the short term, but you haven't dealt with any of the emotions.
Correct.
And that's actually just using sex as a buffer.
Yes.
Which using sex as a buffer is completely different experience than using sex as on choice, on purpose, as an experience, as a gift, as a relationship.
Correct.
That's a completely different emotional sensation.
Yes. And I actually did just a bonus podcast episode on this just a few weeks ago. So it's episode 141 and a half. Okay, it's in between episodes 141 and 142, and it's called "What If He's Addicted to Sex?" Okay, so I talk a little bit about this. There's a whole bunch of podcast episodes right around there all about sex and sexual insecurities and all that.
And in the same way we can buffer with pornography and buffer with sex, you can buffer with Netflix
food.
binging.
You can do anything you overdo, right? Anything that you're doing to distract yourselves. Moms can do this with trying to be the best mom. Like you can do this with throwing the biggest birthday parties. Like it can literally be anything that you are trying to do in order to change the way you feel or distract yourself from your feelings.
Yeah. And sometimes we're so good at it, we're not even realizing that we're distracting ourselves so fully from emotions we're trying to run away of.
Yes.
So big kind of pullback, why forgiveness for the man is so powerful and a necessary process to go through. Because when we allow ourselves to process the heavy emotions we're carrying around, not only are we learning how to not use buffering and distract ourselves, but it takes away some of the pressure to even need it to be there, to even need the buffering, to even need
the pull,
the pull for it, because we're dealing with the underlying emotions. And that's honestly when the pull of pornography disappeared in my life is when I had no need for it anymore. I let the negative emotions be processed in a way that I was able to not even have the pull towards it because I didn't need the distraction anymore. I dealt with the underlying emotions.
Sure. So can you walk us through like the actual practical timeline kind of like, obviously this wasn't something you did automatically right away.
No, in fact, I feel like letting go, the forgiveness came after. The forgiveness came even farther down the line.
Right. Well, let's talk about how it even started. Like at first, I remember you've said this to me, is like you thought that you almost kept that, you didn't allow yourself to forgive yourself because you thought that same thing, that it would somehow was really important for you to keep feeling guilty about it so that you didn't do it again.
Right. If you are always beating yourself up about it, then maybe you beat yourself up enough to not do it.
Right. Ladies, this is kind of the thought that if you hate yourself enough, then you'll love you. Like if you hate yourself skinnier. Have you ever tried to do this? It's like, oh, if I constantly tell myself how uncomfortable I am, how much I hate my body, then that'll be the thing that motivates me to change and to diet and to exercise and have the body I want. But that has literally never worked for anybody.
So one of the ways we got to forgiveness, even as your topic, for your master classes, we were having this discussion of what does it mean to truly forgive yourself. And I think your other podcasts have done a wonderful job explaining that. But just for a recap, it's when you stop feeling anger or resentment towards someone or something or some situation. And I would just add to that, stop feeling the shame and the guilt for yourself on those situations. And I really had to get to that space where I had forgiven myself for my actions to be even able to come on a podcast and talk about it publicly. And even still now and then, it's not that the emotions not pops up every now and then, in a sense. Like even now and then, Jolene will share what she does as a living. You did it this evening, and I'm kind of just like, okay. Like, yep, that's me. And mostly the only reason I'm feeling it is I don't feel the guilt and the shame, but I still have a little bit of concern of what other people think of me, a little bit. I've worked on a lot of it, that little people pleaser mentality. But and every now and then I'm like, I wonder what they're thinking, as Jilly explains this, because it's obvious who the person is.
They often ask me. They're like, how did you get into that? Right? I'm not like, oh, my husband's been addicted to porn, so I do this. I say, I'm a life coach. I help LDS and Christian women who have a spouse addicted to pornography. They're like,
so the
that
story
is amazing.
Comes forward.
How did you get into that? Because that's not a profession people just
And I'm not saying that
normally.
After you forgive yourself, then you need to go publicly tell everybody. That's, again, we've
talked
shared
about
that
that
many times. Like we are doing that for a completely different reason, and
it's not part of the forgiveness process.
It's not part
ladies.
of any healing or any process that has to be. Now that your husband is over it, he has to go publicly announce it. To his over to a group announcement or something. No, that's not what we're saying. It doesn't have to be posted on Facebook or anything. But the feeling underneath is to process the emotions of the guilt and the shame, so that when I recall the past, my past self, the past actions that I took, and the moments in our marriage that I'm not proud of, but I don't feel the shame in the sense that I feel a different emotion. I feel some compassion for that past person. I feel a little mercy. I feel a little sadness for the actions that were taken and the lack of understanding that person had, right? That I had that long ago. And I can look at that self, that person, those actions with a little bit of a caring. Okay? So that's really different than looking back and thinking about myself as just a horrible person, right? Thinking of myself as just the worst husband in the world. Those thoughts were there. I had all those thoughts. Those thoughts could still pop up if I'm trying to judge myself, right? And judgment is part of that forgiveness process, is to let go of the judgment. Judgment keeps us stuck.
Yes.
Judgment is like, you know when a judge gets up, they give you their final verdict, right? It's like the final judgment. They pound the gavel. It's like, this is it. Judgment. Mm-hmm. That's it. Done.
Right.
No changes.
Right.
When we judge ourselves and we say, I'm this person.
Yeah.
I am this way. This is my judgment. That person is that way. That person won't change. Right. That person is that. Judgment is final.
Yeah.
Our brain can't comprehend or leave open the ability to grow, the ability to progress and change. And so judging ourself, this is a talent. This is very tricky to do, to not judge yourself, not just first you have to do it for your past self. So you can apply this to your past self. When you can let go of judgment of your past self, that's when you are open to the forgiveness process a little bit more, open for the progress and the change. Or maybe the forgiveness allows less judgment of the past self. But this is like next level, is to not judge yourself while you're going through it.
Right.
That is another level of not judging.
Yeah.
Right? So how do you not judge yourself while you're yelling at your children?
Yes. So this is actually something, I love that you're bringing this up, because this is actually, so the process that I teach inside my coaching program, step number 1 is awareness, right? Step number 2 is acceptance. And what that really means is not judging. I actually find it easier for most of my clients to learn how to not judge currently, and then it's easier when they learn how to do that for simpler, more daily things that they're currently working through, things that they don't feel are as heavy or as important.
Sure.
Then they learn, once they learn that skill, it's not a talent, it's a skill you can learn, right? So once you learn that skill, then it's much easier to start applying it to past decisions, right? So ladies, any memory that is just like coming to your mind right now, anything, if you think about that, still with you, whether it's you haven't forgiven yourself for something you perceive as a mistake, or something else somebody else did that you still are struggling with, that just keeps coming back up, then that's what I'm talking about. If you learn how to not judge yourself right now for the little things like forgetting your car keys or leaving a kid at school that you forgot to pick up or whatever it is, right? Then it's much easier to apply that skill to the things that we think are deeper and harder and more important. The more importance our brain places on something, the more weight it has, and we tend to think that it is harder to forgive, right? We tend to think that the heavier something is, the more important it is, the more it has to do with like our morals and values, the harder it is to forgive. But really the process of forgiveness is very simple, and it's all about stopping feeling anger and resentment, but you have to be able to let go of the judgment first, because the judgment is what keeps us stuck in the anger and the pain and the shame and the guilt and all those negative emotions.
Yeah, and it's all the go back and listen to podcast 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like it's all the basics of thought work. It's the basics of the model. It's not letting our thoughts work against us, not letting our feelings work against us, and doing it on purpose. Right. My interactions with someone that I haven't forgiven or I have bitter feelings towards are way different.
Yes.
Than my interactions with someone who I can sit there and not judge, and let them be who they are. Yes. And let them be human, and allow them to make mistakes just like I make, and allow them to go through their learning process as well, right? Yeah. Because when I have compassion for my older self, my previous self, it expands my ability to have compassion for others who are making those same mistakes, same errors, and maybe that's too much judgment in those words, but that when they are making those decisions, I can have more compassion for them, even when they're affecting me. Right. Even when they're affecting a relationship with them. Right. Even when it's affecting my life, I can be a little more open and understanding to that, not just because I've gone through it, but also because I've gone through something that then I have applied non-judgment and forgiveness on.
Ooh, that's a good point. I like that, because I think that there's something to that. The reason that I'm able to talk about, I get asked this a lot. How do you talk about this all day, every day? How do you go through this all day, every day? Like, it's not just that I went through it. It's not just that Rob was addicted to porn and I went through all of these things. It's that I went through them and then forgave and learned how to trust again. And I watched my thoughts and managed my brain and learned how to process my emotions and learned this 5-step process on how to be in charge of my own life rather than live as a reaction to his choices, right? I thought it was involuntary and it wasn't. And when I learned that and applied the shifts, that's what makes me able to talk about it now. Because if I were still feeling all of the shame and all of the worthlessness and all the rejection and all the betrayal and all that heaviness, if I were still feeling this, I wouldn't be able to come on this podcast and talk about this. Now, do I have moments of that? Totally. I've shared those with you on this podcast many times. Okay, I have those moments. I still process things, but I apply the process. I go through the process, the awareness, the acceptance, the processing of the emotion, choosing a new thought, retraining my brain. I apply those steps so that I can move forward and leave it behind. I can let it go.
And so that you can create the results you want.
Yes.
Right? Rather than just receiving whatever result comes automatically.
Correct, right?
Which is so different.
So different. And especially, ladies, if we think about this in the context, not just of you, but your relationship with your spouse. We think that, oh, well, our relationship is just never going to be the same because he lied to me. And so now I just don't trust him. And so now there's no trust in our relationship. And we just kind of take that.
Final judgment.
Yes, final judgment, as
change.
if that's not anything different. Or I can't forgive him because he lied too many times. I can't forgive him because I forgave him once, but then he did it again. And so now I feel like that's it. This is where we are. I just don't trust him. I can't forgive him. And we take that as if there's no other option. And there is. And I think that's the same for you with self-forgiveness.
Right. It happened in my life. It's there.
Right.
Right? Like, go back
once
and change
an addict,
it. Can't go
always
back and
an
change
addict,
it, right?
right?
Like, I can't go back and change those actions.
Right.
So, am I just destined now to feel guilty and shamed and hate myself for the rest of my life?
Right.
Is that the permanent
the judgment? Is
consequence?
That the verdict?
That's the verdict. That's it. No change, no progress.
Right.
It's permanent stamp.
Is that what you deserve for your actions?
Is that what I deserve for my action? What a great question.
Right.
Right?
That's kind of what we think, ladies, right? We're like, well, he deserves to feel horrible for the rest of his life because he did something horrible to me. But we often
we want to put hell on them.
Totally.
Here's your punishment.
The problem is that when we do that, we are unintentionally keeping ourselves in hell. We are unintentionally keeping ourselves in the judgment process. In order to have him be the guilty party for the rest of our lives, even just in our own head, if we think he deserves to feel terrible for the rest of his life, then what that means is that we get to keep a judgment on him. And our judgment, ladies, comes with anger and resentment, and that means you're never going to forgive. That means you get to carry around emotional baggage for the rest of your life. So you pass that verdict on him, he deserves to feel negative for the rest of his life. You unknowingly are also putting that verdict on yourself. You now are also feeling negative for the rest of your life. And if that's how you want to do it, great. But I want you to know that that's what you're doing, and I want you to choose it on purpose. Because most of us aren't.
Yeah, I agree. Like, that's exactly correct.
Which is why I'm teaching this class, because most of us don't know
the reason you
how
forgive
to do it
is not
or why
some gift for the other person.
You don't even ever have to tell them.
Gift for yourself.
Did I tell you when I forgave you?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
You didn't come up to me like, I forgive you.
Yeah, it wasn't like this movie moment.
Da-da-da.
Yeah.
No. But I think it shows up in your reactions. It shows up in our relationship. It shows up in our connection. It shows up in those aspects that are tangible. And I never told you when I forgave myself. I think it's also a bit of a process, right? I think
can be, for sure.
Yeah, you can and I always judged it based off of the memory, right? Like if I remember my past self, like even today I was looking through all the photos
on
of our
phone.
kids on my phones, all my old photos. And I'm like, I am so sad. My
they're
babies
so little,
are so
and now they're
little.
not.
You know, and I saw a picture of us packing up and moving in our U-Haul and like really, really old photos.
Yeah.
You had some on there too. And I saw myself and my brain remembered
where you were.
Where I was
emotionally
in my addiction process at those moments, you know? And, you know, I felt bad for that person that was there, but not felt bad
in the same way
in myself now. Like
you didn't carry it over.
It wasn't carried. I didn't feel the same guilt and shame and hate of myself that was being carried at that time. But I saw that and I felt bad. So I took a moment to process that grief, right?
Yes,
it's a little
it's
grief. You know, it's a little grief. It's a little grief for the time lost and the time spent not how I wanted it to be.
Right.
You know? And so I just let myself feel those emotions.
Right.
So it's not like because you forgive, it all of a sudden is whitewashed and everything's done and, you know, it never comes up again. That's we're not advocating sticking your head in the sand.
Right.
And, you know, not ever pretending like it never happened.
Right.
Because that also doesn't work.
No,
right?
That's
that doesn't
denial. Yes.
That's denial of the situation, denial of the emotions. So forgiveness is not that either. We think forgiveness is somehow whitewashing behavior and what happened and the hurt emotions. It's not hiding it. It's not sweeping it under the rug.
Honestly, it's accepting it.
It's actually going through it.
Right.
It's going through that there was hurt. It's allowing ourselves to grieve the moments. It's allowing ourselves to feel sad about it and feel guilt about it and feel shame about it and, you know, really wish we hadn't done it. You know, it's allowing that process so that it doesn't have to continually run and stay in our life.
Right.
So that we can forgive and move on. Forgive and let it go. Let go of the tightness and the grasp that we have on it. And it's not letting go to make it disappear. It's not moving on to be blind to it. Right? That's not what forgiveness is either.
Right.
It's that your internal state has let go of the anger and resentment.
Yeah.
And there's kind of a calm or a peace about the situation,
100%.
right? And it's not that difficult emotions don't come up, right? Life's got the 50-50.
Right.
And but it's knowing what to do with those and not making it mean today that I'm a horrible person. Right.
So was there like an experience? So I've talked about this before. My experience with forgiving you was actually a kind of a culminated in kind of a moment and an experience. And I have a bonus podcast episode on that. And it's called My Journey of Forgiveness. And it's actually episode 24 and a half. And you can go listen to that. But it was a specific experience where I had processed tons of emotion and then I had realized that there was like a little bit of hurt and pain that I was still kind of holding on to. And I talk about what that actually looked like specifically to let that go, what that experience was. So for you, was there a particular memory or experience you want to share, or was it more of a gradual process that then you eventually were just like realized you'd forgiven yourself?
So one benefit of forgiving yourself, it's a gradual process for me. But one benefit, and working on the thoughts, working on the emotions, working on what comes up with each day and life and things. But one of the benefits of forgiveness is that I began to be able to love myself again. Yeah. And love who I am and love myself and take care of myself rather than hate myself. Right? And hate. And so that didn't answer your question because it's a gradual process for me. But the reason I brought up that is because as I used forgiveness to replace hate, it allowed me to fill myself with love for who I am. Right. And myself.
That's a fascinating point. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, go ahead. So I would say that's just a process because I would look at myself now and be like, wow, I still have a ways to go on loving myself more and taking care of myself and caring for myself. But the forgiveness is kind of that process that opened up.
Right. I think that's a really good point that you brought up, because most of us don't realize how much space the negativity and the resentment and the pain and the anger and all that negative emotion, how much space that's taking up inside of us and in our relationship. Forgiveness is the process of letting that all go. And then that opens up the opportunity for you to replace it with something more positive. So most of the time what I hear is, well, I want to feel more connected to my husband. I want to feel more loved. I want to feel more loving toward myself. I don't like that I hate myself. I hate my body. I don't feel confident, right? We have all of these negative things inside of us. And what we don't realize is that forgiveness and letting all of that out is actually the process with which we can then put more of that positive stuff back in. Right now, we're trying to cram more positive stuff in, but there is no space, right? There is no space for more connection. There's no space for more intimacy between you and your spouse in your relationship, because you're full of resentment and bitterness and anger and betrayal and humiliation and all these negative emotions that you cannot get any more positive back in. And you have to be, if you actually want that in your relationship or even just for yourself, you have to be able to, you have to learn how to go back in and process that negative emotion and release it. And that's what forgiveness really is. So that then you can have the connection that you want. It's a great point. All right, anything else you want to say?
Well, I just think of how separate it is from the other person.
Okay.
I want to talk about that.
Yeah.
We think that it's so dependent on the other person's behavior, change, actions, and everything.
Yes.
But forgiveness can be done independent of the person changing or changing behavior. Doesn't mean the situation or circumstance doesn't change.
Right.
But I think of a difficult divorce.
Sure.
Where the husband never changes.
Yeah.
Right? And then the spouse, the wife, now is in a position, in a circumstance that's forced to live the rest of their life without them.
Right.
Right? Okay. I've seen both scenarios where the spouse holds bitterness and resentment and anger and hate to that person, and where they've been able to forgive, feel compassion for that other person, and progress in their life. And honestly, the spouse can do the same thing. Right? Can still be the bum and still be the addict and still never change in both those scenarios. But one, forgiveness allows the person to move on, and the other one stay stuck in that relationship even though it's ended.
Correct.
Now let's say the same thing for a relationship that doesn't end.
Right.
And is still going.
Right.
I've seen this as well. I've probably seen this more,
yes.
right?
Yes.
Where the relationship continues and the behavior doesn't necessarily change.
Right.
The person stays the same. And one person's able to forgive and feel compassion and progress themselves. And then the other relationship where they just stay bitter. Right? And stay and don't forgive. And stay and keep resentment and hate. I'm not sure what the point of that is, but just that the forgiveness is for you and independent.
Right.
It sounds stupid, right? It doesn't sound right. It sounds wrong.
Well, it kind of,
in experience,
yeah,
it's for you. Right? It's for yourself. That's who gets the reward.
Right.
The forgiveness is it doesn't reward the other person.
100%.
We're kind of confused about that. We think it's
100%. So if you go listen to podcast episode 53, it's called Forgiveness. And then you can also go listen to, I did it just a couple weeks ago. I think it's episode 147, and it's called Do I Have to Forgive?
And you don't have to.
You don't have to.
Right. You don't have to do that.
Because you don't have to.
Honestly, sometimes that anger and resentment feels really good, and maybe that's where you're at, and maybe that's exactly where
you need to
be.
But just do it on purpose.
Right?
That's the whole point, ladies, of every podcast episode I ever do, is to help you become aware and to choose on purpose, because I want you to recognize that you can. Right? Because most of the time,
I'm choosing to feel angry.
I'm choosing to feel angry. I'm choosing not to forgive him. Great. do it on purpose and like your reasons.
And process it and allow it.
And that's very different than saying, well, that is than doing it out of being like spiteful, right? Well, I'm not going to forgive him. That is just what I'm feeling right now, and that is where I deserve to be because he did all these terrible things.
Do it for yourself.
That's fine, but do it for yourself on purpose in a spirit that you like. Have your own back on your decisions. That's my whole purpose, ladies, in teaching you how to manage your mind and how to process your emotions and become aware of all of this is so that you can live your life on purpose rather than feeling stuck like everything is happening to you, especially when you feel like it's happening to you because of the decisions that your husband is making, right? So go listen to those episodes of forgiveness because forgiveness has nothing to do with the other person. The definition of forgiveness doesn't say anything about what the other person has to do. It doesn't say you have to tell them. It doesn't say they have to say sorry. That's usually what we think. And that's even how we teach our kids, right? We're like, oh, you hit him. Go say sorry. Oh, it's not sorry. And then they say, it's okay. My kids get upset. If someone comes and says sorry, if they say sorry, if one of my kids hits another one and I'm like, okay, go say sorry. And they do. And the child who was hit doesn't say it's okay. Then the child who hit comes and is like, they didn't say it's okay. I said I'm sorry and they didn't say it's okay. Right? They get upset that the other person didn't respond to their apology, whether it was heartfelt or not. They get upset. Right? And that's how we kind of start thinking our interaction of forgiveness is. It's like he did something bad, he should come apologize, and then I have to say that it's okay. That is not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness doesn't mean you condone the behavior. Forgiveness doesn't mean that it's okay that he did it. Forgiveness is giving yourself the gift of letting go of that emotional baggage so that you can start moving on yourself, independent of what he's doing. If that makes sense.
Sure. Just a little side note.
Yeah.
Last night I was angry.
Okay.
And I was a little resistant to feeling angry.
Yes.
Right? I was resistant. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to feel angry. I shouldn't feel angry. I had a lot of judgment.
I don't like feeling angry.
I don't like feeling angry. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be angry. And I finally had to, and this is what we're talking about, choosing to be angry. I didn't react or respond, but I finally had to decide for myself, I'm resisting this anger. I'm going to choose to feel angry. I'm just feeling angry right now. Mm-hmm. No judgment. It's okay. There's just a lot of anger at the moment. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have to react to it. I didn't have to respond. I didn't have to buffer. I didn't have to distract. I just let it be there. And that's what I needed to give myself at the moment because the other routes weren't working, right? Like expressing it wasn't working. That was making me more angry. Resisting it wasn't working. That was just keeping it more
They're just
stuck,
keeping it there, right?
Keeping it there. And so that's what I'm suggesting when we say, maybe you're choosing to feel the anger and resentment, but you're doing it on purpose, right? You're doing it with a very awareness of the anger's feeling and presence and allowing it to be there for as long as it needs to be there.
Most of you, unless you're a client, don't know how to do this correctly.
Right. Most of the time
we're if you take this advice and then you're like, well, Rob and Jolene said that I was allowed to, and I get to do that. Most of you are doing it wrong. So this is why I would encourage you to come coach with me. I will teach you how to do it correctly because it doesn't involve anyone else and it doesn't involve reacting to our emotion, which is what we typically think that it is.
Our brain's really sneaky about justifying our emotions, and it does it through justifying thoughts and
it justifies our actions because of the actions we take because of our emotions. Well, I was really angry. It's like, well, why'd you yell? Well, because I was angry. We're good at justifying the actions we take as a reaction to the emotion that we're feeling. That's what our brain is good at.
Right. So we're not justifying your actions in this sense. We're just saying you can choose it.
To process it. And that's very different. That's a little bit of a tangent.
Yeah,
but
I'd say there. But
yeah. Anything else you wanted to share?
That was it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say to my ladies while we're here?
I guess I just would say forgiveness is for yourself. And I would also say to the spouse that forgiveness is, I guess I'd say the same thing. I guess it's for yourself too. I guess that's more obvious, but I would say forgiveness is available.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I think
sometimes we don't give ourselves forgiveness.
Right.
We don't think it's available to us. Mm-hmm. We don't think it's an option.
Right.
Or we won't get there.
One of the thoughts that I want to give, if there's any gentlemen listening, one of the thoughts that I want to give you is, and I want to give this to the ladies too, is What if where you are right now isn't what you deserve? What if you do deserve forgiveness? What if, as the addict, and you think, I don't deserve forgiveness, what if that's wrong? What if you do? What if you do deserve forgiveness? And as the wife, what if you deserve to forgive him as a gift to yourself? A lot of times, again, we think that forgiveness is he doesn't deserve it. It has nothing to do with him. What if it has nothing to do with him? What if forgiveness is something that you deserve?
You as a spouse, do you deserve it? Like, you've been through a lot. You deserve it.
You do deserve it. And if you don't know how to do it, I will come and I will teach you, because it's something that I think you deserve. I think you deserve forgiveness. And that is a process that I can teach you, because I have felt it and experienced it and learned how to do it in my own life and have applied it multiple times, so that now I am in a place where I can see what the other side is like, and it is beautiful. And it is so much more open, and that's what's available to you. I see what's available to you. What's available to you is connection with your spouse and with yourself, intimacy with your spouse and with yourself, confidence in your ability to handle anything, and the freedom to have a life where you are making conscious decisions, where you are once again steering, where you're no longer just, no one's at the helm, and it's like, oh, well, I'm just like, Rob's creating a storm and I just have to like sit here and suffer through it. No, I have the ability to navigate. I can choose how I respond. I can steer myself through this. I have learned how to do that, and I want to teach you how to do it. So again, I would encourage you, you can go to my website, jolenewind.com, sign up before next week. We are starting next Monday on March 27th. I think that's next Monday. Yes, March 27th. That is when the How to Forgive Masterclass is going live, and I want to encourage you to come join me. The reason that I'm hosting this inside my coaching program is to give you guys the one-on-one attention that you need to keep this a intimate experience where I can help you through this process. I will teach you the process, the practical steps of how to forgive, and then I'm going to go walk you through them to help you apply it and give you the attention that you need.
Yeah, you don't want to miss it, because there's one thing to just hear it on the podcast, and there's another thing to see Jolene coach and to hear coaching of other people and yourself. It's like, that's the true process. Like, that just blows your mind away just for a few minutes, and that's like nothing that's on this podcast. It just can't be done through a podcast. The coaching is something completely different, and you've been listening, you want to truly apply it, you want to truly get it into your life, rather than just kind of hearing it and trying to apply it. Like, you want to really get it in there, come coach.
So gentlemen, step up. Buy your wife a gift. I love you ladies so much. Thank you, Rob, for joining. And I'll see you guys next week on a brand new episode, so take care. Hello, my lady. I wrote a book, and I would love for you to read it. It's called The Not Enough Wife, and you can get it on Amazon today. This book is for any woman who has ever felt like she wasn't enough, not enough as a wife or as a mom, if she didn't have Instagram-worthy enough pictures, if she didn't throw Pinterest-worthy parties, if she ever felt like she was not enough, this is the book for her, and it's for you too. So go to Amazon today, go search up The Not Enough Wife by Jolene Wynn, and grab a copy for yourself and for all the women in your life. I hope you love it, and I can't wait to hear what you think.